Happy Mother's Day. Or is it? This is a difficult time of year for a lot of us in midlife, and I just wanted to dedicate today's podcast to this topic. So today's podcast will be short and sweet. It's just a little reflection on this idea of motherhood on Mother's Day. I think that it's fraught with lots of different ways of thinking about things and feeling about things. And I want to name that, and I want to give us all a chance just to kind of self-reflect on that idea. Why? Why is Mother's Day a difficult thing for many of us at this stage in life? And what are the kinds of mothering issues that are coming up in that difficulty for us? If any of this interests you, and maybe even if it doesn't, you're just curious about what I'm going to talk about, please keep listening. Welcome. This is Midlife Crisis to a Centered Life Thriving, a podcast that teaches women in midlife to unapologetically stop silencing their dreams and start designing the lives they want to live in. I'm your host, Dr. Natalie, and as a clinical psychologist of the last 2 decades and a twice divorced single mother myself, I not only know how hard it can feel heading into midlife, I am living it right here with you. I have taken all the many failed attempts and lessons learned in my own life and combine it with my extensive clinical experience to give you the tools you need to make midlife the best time in your life. No joke. So let's get started. Welcome back, everybody. All right. So today I decided to set aside time just for you and have this little conversation about Mother's Day and about what feelings that can draw up for a lot of us. So this will be another little talking head video where it's just you and I in the podcast, and I will resume some really great guests starting next week. So Mother's Day, it's just a holiday that sells greeting cards, right? I mean, it shouldn't be that big a deal. And yet it is a really big deal. I was having a conversation the other day in a consultation group that I'm part of as a psychologist and a therapist. And one of the other therapists brought up that she was just noticing that in anticipation of the holiday, Mother's Day coming up, that many of her female clients were just having a mixed bag of feelings. And so it made me start thinking, this is a topic that might be good for the podcast, because I think for women in midlife, it's especially kind of different. When I had my son, I was 27. And I remember being in a Lamaze class back in the day. I don't even know if they do those kinds of things anymore or if they call it Lamaze class, but that's what it was called when I was 27, having my first child. And there was a woman in the class with us that was 38. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, that's like a whole decade out of me. And she's still willing and wants to do this. And it actually was her first child. And she and her husband were really nice. My mother and I were in the Lamaze class together because at the time, my son's father was living in a different state than I was as we were transitioning, trying to decide which state to live in. So I was taking the class with my mom. This woman and her husband were just lovely. And I remember thinking in awe, like, she's going to have a lot of changes coming her way during a time that she has a small child at home. Like, not to think that they were old, because I don't think that's what was crossing my mind, but I just had an awareness that 38 years old is a good 10 years ahead of me physically. And I don't know if I'd want to be chasing a toddler around when I'm that old. Well, fast forward 11 years, and guess what, guys? I did the same damn thing. I had my child, my second child, 2 weeks before my 39th birthday. So it just so happens that I put myself right in the same position with them. So with this couple that I had met years earlier. So why am I telling you this story? Well, I knew then not what was coming, but that something would be coming. And being a mother in 2 different decades of my life, I can tell you I'm a very different mother today than I was then. And on Mother's Day, a lot of things come up for me around my mom guilt for my first child. Now, is this supposed to be a holiday where you celebrate my momness? Yes. It just for me is sometimes a reminder of some of the things about momming different kids that I would like to rewind and do over, right? And I can't. So I try and just live my life in such a way that I apologize and am accountable for the things that I wish I could change to the, adult child that I have now. And when I see those things, I name them. And I try to do it differently with the child that I still have in my house that I'm raising. So that's the best way that I can come up with it. But I can tell you that that is just one of the many things that come up during Mother's Day for individuals like myself. I mean, there's some life under our feet at this point, right? So let's start with our own mothers, shall we? Some of us have very difficult and challenging relationships with our mothers. Others of us have decent relationships, maybe not the most close, but they're not bad. Others of us still have relationships where we're very close to our mothers, couldn't imagine a world without them. And then some of us don't have mothers at all. Maybe they've passed on. Maybe we never did, right? Maybe we came out of the foster system. Maybe we were eventually adopted, but we never really felt like we resonated with anybody that we would call mother in our life. So there is all sorts of variations of mothering that come up in this world. And I think on a day like today, I want you to challenge yourself to think about what's my relationship with this thing called motherhood. It would have started with a mother or the absence thereof in your life as a child, right? And from that brings with it this map that you create or blueprint that you create for what mothering is. And everything you do from that point through the rest of your life, you kind of keep comparing it backwards. So when I was in my Lamaze class with this woman that was 10 years ahead of me, I kept thinking to myself, she has a lot of life behind her that I don't have. Am I going to be able to do this correctly for this little boy? Oh, I didn't know, by the way, that he was going to be a boy, but for this little baby, am I going to even know what the hell I'm doing? She probably has an edge on me that way. And at the same time, I might have an edge on her because I'm a little younger, right? I was already thinking about these things, but it was bounced off a blueprint that I had of a mother of 5 kids. I was the middle of her children, but she had older kids that she had when she was younger. And 12 years later, had the youngest of her brew. And I already had a framework in my mind of there's mothering at a young age and there's mothering at an older age. And it looks one way this way because I was right in the middle and watched enough that I could see what it looked like for my older siblings. And there's one way this way. I already had a blueprint. I already had a relationship to mothering that looked a certain way. And it calls up a lot of feelings for me because even now I comparatively am looking at my own mothering journey through that lens. So what's that lens like for you? What did you learn growing up with your mother? What kinds of things did you observe her do? What kinds of things do you wish she would have done? Has anybody ever in your life talked to you about the fact that there sometimes is loss even with a good mother? There is sometimes the loss of the things you would have wanted in your childhood from that mothering figure that you didn't get. Have you grieved those losses? Have you even thought of them? Could you even call them up now if I ask you to? It may be something to sit down and think about because Mother's Day calls all this up for us because it's a day according to the calendar that's all about mothering. And yet these are things that we're wrestling with from day to day. This is a map. This is a way in your head that you have of thinking about yourself and your world that was created by this very, first relationship possibly in your life or lack thereof. And it has a significant impact for you, right? Now let's go into the layering of you're a woman. And so probably you were conditioned that you should have children. And maybe you did, right? Maybe you're like myself and you have become a mother in the traditional sense of the word. Maybe you couldn't have children. Maybe you wanted them and that was not something that you could have. And all of those feelings get called up on Mother's Day. Maybe you're still knee deep in that, right? Because some of us do become parents later in life because we couldn't have children earlier in life for some reason. And we're adopting and we're fostering, or, we're having surrogate mothers or whatever venue of mothering that you are conjuring up in your life, right? Maybe you're not a traditional mother, but you're mothering other people. Maybe you're a mentor to people that are younger than you, and you're bringing into that mentorship some part of you that learned how to do that through the mothering lens. And either it's because you got it or because you're doing the opposite of what you got and you didn't get it. And these are the things you would have wanted. And those are the things that you're trying to bring out into the world. So, that stuff is going to come up on Mother's Day. Was I a mom? How do I feel about the fact that I lived in a society that kind of pushed that on me over and over and over? Do I feel like I did a good enough job? Gosh, mom guilt. Can we talk about it, right? Like, it is horrid. And it all comes out of all of this programming and conditioning that we've learned about what it is to be a good and not good mom. And part of what we learned about good and not good came from our families, came from our cultures, came from society at large. And now, of course, if you're an older millennial heading into your midlifehood, you're also, struck with comparative analysis by a million when you're looking at social media mothering. Like, that's a new thing that most Gen X moms like myself didn't have exposure to, even with our 20, year oldish versions. Because, in the 2000s, when we were having those kids, this stuff wasn't like that. Didn't show up until a little bit later. And maybe we started to get in on that bandwagon, but man, is there a comparative analysis of our mothering on social media that just looks way different than I think, any of us could have ever anticipated. And that adds things to this Mother's Day. Holy crap. I feel like I've already, failed somehow when I wake up on Mother's Day morning and haven't sent enough memes and happy Mother's Day graphics on all of my social media feeds to all the potential moms out there. Yikes, people, right? Now, let's talk about if you are a mom. How do you feel on Mother's Day when nobody recognizes you? Right? That's a thing. Like, it's a real thing. And it's possibly by design. I hate to tell you this, but part of the social programming we have is to be the unseen heroes in our families' lives as the mother. That is part of the job description, is to do this in a nuanced way where everybody is depending on us to show up. And when we don't show up, things crumble. And yet we're supposed to deliver it in such a way that nobody sees us doing it. Certainly nobody sees us sweat. There was an actual commercial on that in the 80s and late or early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. I mean, come on. It was for an antiperspirant that I can't think of off the top of my head, but come on. Like, literally, we were trained in those early years. This is the kind of mom you should be. Don't let them see you sweat. Do all the things, not just one thing. Go have a career, go be a mom, go do all the things, but don't ever let them see you struggle with that in any way. So when you set up your momness idea around this, what do you think happens? Nobody pays attention. Mother's Day comes and you might get a card, right? It's nothing big. It's nothing grandiose. And then how do you feel about that? Usually it makes us feel pretty crummy. And yet it is the way in which we've designed this, right? Oh my goodness. Then you layer in midlife and you might have some of these older kids. Now, some of us had some kids late in life, and so we still have young ones at home. But many of us have kids that are aging out of our houses and our lives and could care less if they take us out to brunch on a Sunday sometime in May. Like, they don't care about this. And yet, again, we designed it that way. We wanted to raise them to put themselves first and, go after the things in life that they wanted. That we taught them to be these independent thinkers and to want things for themselves in life and not bog themselves down with being responsible for other people. Well, what the heck did we think was going to happen when we raised these beautiful adults to go out and do that? They do it. And that means we're left in some dust sometimes too, and underappreciated and not seen and not heard and certainly not understood. But I don't know if we even understand ourselves in these scenarios, right? But this podcast today, I think, is mostly just to kind of get you thinking about that stuff. I just want you to think about it. And I do want to pay homage to my friends that were mothered or not mothered. I do want to pay homage to my friends that didn't have kids, maybe by choice, maybe not by choice. Mother's Day brings up lots of things for you because we were all socially conditioned to show up and be moms. That was one of the things. Go do it all. Go do the career, but you better have those babies. And so if you chose that or didn't even choose it and just find yourself now in midlife in the predicament of I didn't have a chance to do it. It wasn't in the cards for me for some reason. This is a grieving day for you. This is a day of loss in a lot of ways. And, for some of us, that we've already grieved it. We named that we didn't want to have kids and we moved on from it, but we can't move on from a society that told us we should have. And that comes up on this day. And all the feelings and angst around that can come up on this day. And for those of us who didn't choose it, but find ourselves not being mothers, maybe we wish we had. Maybe we tried to be and we couldn't for whatever reason, and then chose not to become a mother in some other capacity. We're grieving on a Mother's Day, right? We didn't get what we wanted. We didn't have the motherhood. We didn't become mothers in the way that we wanted to. So this is a tough day, and we're thinking on the other side of it that all these women that became mothers are getting appreciated and we, see them enjoying this day. And maybe they're not, right? We're kind of missing each other in the night when we think that everybody on Mother's Day is enjoying the day. I'm not saying they're not out there. They're out there. But, for some of us, this is a hard day. For some of us, we're non-traditional mothers, as I mentioned before, and we don't get appreciated. We are mentors to people and we mother them in how we do stuff. We show up that mothering way in everything we do. And yet nobody's ever sending us a card on this day. It just doesn't feel like it sits well or sits right for us. I just want you to think about these things on Mother's Day. Mother's Day is complicated. Mother's Day is hard for many of us out here. And I won't, and I don't want to undersell that it's really hard to have not had the mother that you wanted, to have had a mom that you have a difficult relationship with on a day like this, and to be in the middle of the programming and conditioning that pulls you one way and the other way at the same time. I want you to know I hear you, I see you. And I know this is a difficult day. And I know that for women in midlife, the other layer of this now becomes when we have to reparent our parents. We're not going to get represented for that on a Mother's Day. I don't even think there's a day named for that. But I do know that we're being put in positions to make decisions for our own families, the elderly in our own families, because they can't make those decisions on their own at this point. Or we're in the phase of it where there's some jockeying for power, right? Jockeying for who's in the lead there because they're not completely ready to ask for our help. And yet we can see it. We can see it on the horizon. And we're already taxed in our lives with the stress that we have for ourselves. And if we had a troublesome relationship with that mother, for instance, how do you mother a mother that never mothered you right in the first place? These are all things that come up on a day like today. So I just wanted to bring this up, start us thinking on this journey about this, and have for ourselves some compassion, some compassionate awareness that this is tough, that this is not an easy place, that this is not a day of just celebration for all of us, that for some of us there's grief that's embedded in it. And to be knowledgeable of that is to be considerate of one another on that. Everybody's journey is a little bit different. Everybody has a relationship with the idea of motherhood a little bit differently. And I want us all to just be respectful of one another on this day and of ourselves and to take care of ourselves. Really, the message I want to leave all of us with is whatever you do for Mother's Day, you do that for you. If it's grieving, grieve. If it's forgetting the day, it's forgetting the day. I just want you to have Mother's Day be a marker in your life that allows you space to be in it whichever way you are. Don't worry about celebrating it the way it's supposed to be. Don't avoid it because it's there and your relationship with mothering is there. And I would encourage you to just explore it for yourself, journal about it, self reflect on it, and heal those inner parts of you. In a lot of ways, we grow up and have to mother ourselves, the parts of us that just didn't get the guidance from safe adults in our life the way that we would have wanted, or because the world was just a little too backwards. It still wasn't up with the times and was not giving us as children and adolescents and young adults what we needed. And so we just got parts of us that we're missing through this mothering or parenting process. So some of today, I want you just to take time to heal the parts of you that are still wounded around that mothering idea. Take care of yourself on a day like today, and take care to acknowledge that you are the best version of you that you can be. I promise you, that's not what I want to say. I don't know. Momming is hard. Having relationships with our mothers is hard. That's okay. Just take this day for yourself and do for you what you need. All of us had mothers or the absence of mothers, and we have our imprint based on where we started from and what we've gathered through that process. None of us heal from avoiding that. None of us heal from not looking and addressing that. And it makes us better people when we grow some empathy for this day doesn't look the same for everybody, nor should it. And so let's have respect and honor the vastness with which people can show up emotionally on a day like today. I really think that that helps all of us have a better life, have a more centered life, thriving. Because I am a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Minnesota, I have to make sure at the end of each of these episodes that I give you the disclaimer that none of the material that I talk about in these podcasts is meant to replace any kind of therapy or formal medical or mental health treatment. And in fact, anything that I offer on my website, my coaching programs, any kind of psychoeducational materials that I release are not a replacement for that level of care. So just take that into account when you listen. This is information for you, and hopefully you find it of value, both as an educational tool and for your entertainment. And I also want to mention that if anyone you know is in a mental health crisis, needs additional help, I always include these 2 crisis resources. They're available to anybody. Pick up the phone and dial 988 for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And you can always visit their website at suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Additionally, there's actually a crisis text line. So if you're not somebody that likes to pick up the phone, text HOME, home, to 741-741 to the crisis text line. And you can find them online at crisistextline.org. Thank you for listening to my podcast, and I hope that you like and follow me wherever you get your podcasts, and maybe consider leaving me a review. It always helps me to keep this podcast relevant when I know what you want to hear about.